We are only as healthy as our cells. Yvette, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. And I think this is such a brilliant topic. Many of us forget that we are actually made up of a whole bunch of cells. And I love the statement that we are only as healthy as our cells. It brings it down to a very basic biology.
The thing that I also just keep on thinking, we're so used to, again, the car guy. If there's something wrong with your car, if it's an alternator or a battery, you just replace the whole thing. But in the human body, there's so many cells that make up every single different organ or a bone or a heart or a lung or a pancreas or whatever it is. And all of those are made up of specific cells. And we don't always think about that. And if we think, okay, if we're going to do a maintenance, if you have a heartburn, you just throw an antacid down. And there's actually more to it. If you keep the cells happy, maybe the organ will be happy and maybe you'll be happy.
It's a good point you make there. I think many times people forget because I'm just visualizing now. You have heartburn, somebody chugs a tablet down, they think it's just in the area of the stomach. But if you think about it more on the cell level, it becomes a totally different visual.
For sure. And I remember first year zoology when the teacher explained to us about the cells, and you think it is just stupid. It is stuff that I learned in high school, but it is actually so important. And yes, many people have learned this stuff in high school, but they forgot about it. They forgot that these are actually something important. And if you think about it, the cells all have a basic processes that they have to go through. But before we go to the basic processes, I read up a few things about cells in the human body. And because we're pharmacists, we deal with human bodies from time to time with a pet's body as well. But we focus here in functional health, we focus on human bodies. And the cells in our bodies basically fulfill 6 very distinct functions. And one is structural. If you think about bones, we can think about bone as a metal pipe that is just one solid thing and there's no cells, because bones is actually living tissue. And living tissue is made up out of cells. If you think about osteoblast and osteoclast, there's some bone cells that actually build more bone, and there's another cell in the bones that break down and recycle old cells and old components of bone to make something new out of it. So it's a living organ. Bone is not, like I say, it's not a steel pipe that you can just replace. And then metabolism. Cells play a role in metabolism. Without cells, we will never be able to change food into energy. So we won't even be alive. There won't be any energy if we did not have cells for metabolism. Then reproduction, that's a given because cells have to multiply and we multiply ourselves on this earth. Communication. Think about that. And this is a very interesting part of human biology that I'm so totally amazed about, is a communication between cells, between different organs, and between different structures, like in our brain, the pituitary that is in control of so many hormonal things in your body. Specialization. Cells have to specialize because there's brain cells, there's heart cells, there's muscle cells, there's bone cells. They specialize in specific things to form that organ or structure that is going to take care of this amazing machine that God gave us to function the way it's supposed to. And then homeostasis, and I know, Yvette, homeostasis, I know, is one of your favorite things. to keep things balanced, to keep the inside environment to the perfect conditions so that the outside environment won't destroy the rest of it. So cells really make up this body. Men on average have about 36 trillion cells, and women on average 28 trillion cells. That's a lot of cells to keep healthy. Now, to think about those cells, what is it that keeps the cell healthy? I think that is the big question here.
Well, when you look at our cells, we actually have, we can call each cell is like a miniature little body, and it has a vigilant gatekeeper. Now, for all of us know what a gatekeeper is. It's the little guard standing at the door, and it allows certain people in, and it allows certain people out. So fortunately, our cells have these vigilant gatekeepers. And the purpose of that gatekeeper is to make sure that we get the nutrients and the material in that we need. So all the functions you mentioned there, say, for example, you need something for hormones. So that's the point where the gatekeeper will allow all the nutrients in for the hormone production and function. And then you also have to have, and this is very important, you have to have the little gatekeeper to allow the metabolic waste out. So to maintain this very selective discretionary cellular function, the cells need to be, and the whole cell membrane needs to be made up precisely the way that it intended to be, and you'll explain a little bit more in depth of that. And the reason we have to look at how healthy the cell membrane is if you cannot properly assimilate the nutrients that you get in, and you cannot properly eliminate the waste, we then basically can talk about a starved cell, so it doesn't have enough nutrients. Think of this shriveled up little thing, or an absolute constipated one. It's big, it's bloated, there's a whole lot of crap in there. So if that happens and those conditions exist, you then have things where people are sluggish. Now, going back to where you spoke about each function of those cells, you can think about it. If it's not working well, then, for example, somebody breaks an arm or a hip, and it's not really growing on well like it should. Or a person is very sluggish, their energy levels are nothing, doesn't matter what they do. And if you think about it, it's that little gatekeeper now. It can't keep control of what's going in, what's going out. It doesn't have the right thing. So you have to visualize the little cell performing those functions. Now, what we will talk about, that is the building blocks, and we've spoken about so much: lipid, sterols, amino acids. Yes, there are other nutrients, key nutrients, that is important to maintain this. But if you can have a healthy cell, you will also feel a whole lot better. So once we can understand the importance of the nutrients in and the waste out, it really does give us a whole different perspective of, I have indigestion, I'm going to pop a pill. And what I love about this is, for us in functional medicine, we love to go to the root of all things. So if you go down the line and you go down to the root and you see these cells are not performing the way they should, then that should be a wake up. But what I really like is the cell membrane, how it is built up. And I think, you are so well versed with that, Johann. Give us a bit of a explanation there, and I don't think everybody needs to go through high school again for this, but we just want to visualize and see, what does this gatekeeper look like?
Yes. And for many people who don't geek out on this type of science, they might think that the cell membrane is just basically there to keep the inside of the cell on the inside.
Keep it all together.
Yeah. And because I know I've asked a few people, what do you think the function of a cell membrane is? And that's exactly what the answer was. And if you look at even just at this picture, there's so much more going on. This is such an important structure that without it, the cell will die.
Mm-hmm.
And if this breaks down, the cell will die. There's a lot of things that the cell membrane not only protects, it's not just a guard to keep invaders out. It is also, like Yvette said, this vigilant gatekeeper to let in what should come in and to not let in the things that should stay on the outside. Now, the outside is, you'll see the extracellular fluid routinely, and every specific cell, we've talked about that cells are specialized, like a cell that produces a hormone, or a cell that produces bone, or whatever the case may be. You can only think that they need different nutrients in order to make what they're supposed to make. Because think about it, if you want to bake a cake versus an apple tart, you're obviously going to need different ingredients to make each one, and that is the same thing with these specialized cells. So if you look at that cell membrane, it has a phospholipid bilayer. Now, if you look up to this picture, the outside, the little red area, that is the outside of the cell membrane, and the little yellow pieces on the inside, that is the inside of this phospholipid bilayer. So on the outside, you see the hydrophilic head. The hydrophilic head hydrophilic means love water. Water-soluble things is likely to attach on that. But the legs on the inside is hydrophobic, we're called hydrophobic tails, which mean they don't like water. So a water-soluble thing might get past the outside layer of the membrane, but the hydrophobic tail will push it back out because it doesn't like that. And usually something that is lipid soluble, which the plain English word would be fat soluble, might pass through easier, but here's the thing. It's got to be small too, because if it's a big thing, this phospholipid bilayer is too densely packed for just anything to go through. So only small particles might be able to go through, which is usually cell friendly. It's not going to damage the nucleus because this cell membrane, apart from being the gatekeeper, it also protects. And there's one thing that happens. You'll see there's a straight leg and a bent leg, a crooked leg. And it's very interesting. You've heard of saturated fats and unsaturated fats. So a saturated fat is where all the carbons are bound, all the in a perfect valence. It's a fully saturated fat, and they usually make straight legs. But you see the one with a kink, it says on the unsaturated fatty acid, it bends. And we don't really know why, but one thing that it makes possible with this kink in the leg is for that top part, the phosphoric glycerol on the top, it actually can move around in the cell membrane. So it can move from one part, from the left to the right, and in some instances from the outside of the cell membrane to the inside of the cell membrane. Pretty interesting.
That's just incredible. When you look at it like that, it's just incredible how it's made and what a difference that is. And like you said, there's a lot of these things they're still learning about what it all does. But the fact that we can see those, that blows my mind.
Absolutely. And as you can see in this picture, it's not just the phospholipid bilayer. There's other things in there too. There's glycoproteins and different structures in that cell membrane to make life possible for that cell. And one thing that we talked about is in our previous podcast when we talked about cholesterol, and we said cholesterol is so important for your cell membrane. Now, here is the importance of that cholesterol in your cell membrane. The cholesterol actually provides structure. There's little yellow structures on the inside of the cell membrane. And that little yellow structures is actually the cholesterol that provides structure to the cell membrane. And one interesting fact that they discovered is if there is not enough cholesterol in the cell membrane, apart from the structure being not as rigid as it is supposed to be, it is way more permeable, because we call this membrane a semi-permeable membrane, which means only certain things are being let through. So if there is not enough cholesterol in that membrane, now it's not that selective in what it's letting through anymore, which means now the guard, the vigilant gatekeeper, is taking a smoke break because
So,
now anything can come in.
so let me go back and just reinstate what you said. So the cholesterol is very important for the structure of the cell. Okay. That is very interesting. Now, the other thing that you said too is if the concentration of the cholesterol is not good enough, then it can allow things in and things out of the cell that typically wouldn't have happened.
Very true.
And that's concerning, because that could lead to quite a vast amount of deficiencies or not feeling well, or if it's your immune cells. So cholesterol literally is important in all your cells.
For sure. If you think about the lifespan of that cell, wherever it may be, maybe it is a hormone, a cell that produces a hormone. So if it does not have enough cholesterol, enough fats in the cell membrane, how long do you think that cell is going to live? It's probably not going to make it to normal average lifespan before it gets destroyed, because it's letting everything in that wants to come in, and maybe it's losing some stuff that it should not lose.
So you can also, in this day and age, when we talk very much about being nutritionally starved, this would be a good example of your cells you might be big and fat and plump, but your cells are starved.
Yes.
So there's a major difference between overfed and over-nutrient.
Absolutely. And if you see the other protein structures, many of those protein structures are channels to let certain things in, especially some water-soluble things, because we talked about the fat solubles that can just diffuse through the cell wall. But some of those proteins, sometimes the cell needs a nutrient that is actually water-soluble, and it needs either a channel or a transporter. One of the transporters that you'll hear me and Yvette talk about over and over and over and over again is a glucose transporter, because that is also a protein. To transport, it actually attaches from the glucose molecule on the outside of the cell, and it actively, using energy, pull it into the cell. It's not a channel where it just diffuses by electrical charge. It actually is actively being pulled into the cell.
So
and now I want
before you carry on there, Johann, because now this is just how my mind works. So if the structure of the cell is affected, it can also then affect these protein channels. I don't know if that's anything biologic or if it's any science, but in my mind, I'm thinking if there's a channel where it's supposed to be pulled through and the structure holding it together isn't there, this isn't going to happen.
That's exactly the point I want to get to.
Okay, sorry, jumped you ahead.
No, perfect. I'm at the right place. You got right in. If there's not enough cholesterol or enough fatty acids, or the fatty acids are damaged in this phospholipid bilayer, those proteins and those structures and those transporters can't work the way they're supposed to, because they're not being held in place in the right way anymore. So you can just think what is going to happen apart from the diffusing of nutrients. Now those transporters don't work either, which again means early cell death. The cell becomes rigid and hard, and it can't function the way it's supposed to. So there you have it. Phosphobilayer, and this was just an enlargement of how that phospholipid looks. Phospho on the outside, lipid on the inside, and that is how the cell membrane remains intact to keep the cell healthy. And if you think about that, if the membrane is healthy, the cell will be healthy.
Now, sorry for me to, as I'm having a good chuckle here, because us as pharmacists taking everything back to drugs and medicine, I always love the statement that people make when they say, you do not have diabetes because you have a lack of metformin. You do not have a GI-related issue because you have a lack of a PPI. And that's what made me smile, because so many people are of the train of thought that they are in need of a drug to fix what is actually wrong on a cell level. And so many times when I speak to people, I want to shake my head and go, if we can get the cells healthy, you'll feel fantastic. But unfortunately, we've discussed this many times, in a microwave situation in life where everybody wants answers immediately. So I just think it's great when people stop and think before, whenever condition they have, think of that cell, think of what could be missing before you jump onto the next treatment or therapy to understand things a bit better.
Going back to first year zoology, I remember that the professor standing in front of the class discussing the cell membrane and saying, if we can just have something in our world to keep the cell membranes healthy, we probably will not need half of the medicine on our pharmacy shelves. And knowing this, I tend to agree with her. But I think before we move on, Yvette, I think we need to talk about what is it? Why is our cell membranes being attacked? Because we don't do anything different. We eat and we live life. And why is our cell membranes being affected? Why does our cells die off sooner? And why do we get sick?
That is the multi-million-dollar question. And probably one of your and my most favorite topics to discuss is the cell's need for certain nutrients have not changed. You are 100% right. But the source of those nutrients have changed. So if we look at the amount of processed foods we eat around us, if we see the lack of food the way God made it, before it was processed, before man interfered in that, before we made something of it, when we look at that, then you start realizing the cell cannot get what it used to get. The overproduction in farming, the amount of pollutants in the air, the absolute inundation of seed oils in every single thing you buy, where our bodies are totally equipped to handle butter, lard, tallow, the things that the way God made it, when we talk of human appropriate food. So this all goes back to what are we feeding ourselves? And if we can only look at 100 years doesn't even work anymore. It's like 120, 150 years. We've discussed about the refined foods and how foods have entered the human diet that really are not appropriate for humans. And every single time you and I speak about food and nutrients, what are the nutrients we talk about? The amino acids, the fats, and then, the lipids and sterols like we had here for the talk. And then, of course, a small amount of carbohydrates, which are not essential. But again, it goes back to the source of our food. And when we start viewing food as a nutrient, and this is the way to feed those individual cells, it makes a complete brain shift. And you start realizing everything that's in a box, everything that's in a packet, everything that is made in a plant and not grown on a plant, on farms and animals, those are the things that have impacted us. And, I always love the story about friends of ours were working on a construction site and some of the workers ate pizza. You know that the rats ate the boxes before they ate the pieces of pizza that was left over. And the same thing they did that with cereal. The insects and the rats ate the box, not the cereal, but we as humans. Now keep in mind, insects are not, they're not on social media. They're not into marketing. They don't get told that this is the food pyramid and this is how much you should eat. And this week red wine is good and that week red wine is not good. They work 100% purely on instinct. And if you follow what those insects and rats and rodents will and will not eat, it's kind of shocking that us as humans will force feed ourselves things until we really like it. We add enough sugar to it and we add enough additives to it that it is actually palatable, and we've convinced ourselves we are being healthy and, eating nutritious.
You just mentioned the insects. I remember my wife's grandpa said, because he had a maize farm, and he said, if the worms don't eat the corn, you should not eat it either.
Exactly. And my husband always loves to say, if they do not like to eat certain vegetables and they push something away, why are we forcing them to eat it? Because our bodies, God made us in such a way that we should have a natural instinct for what we need. With that said, if you do not have a natural inclination, for example, to say eat pork, if you don't like that, don't eat it. If you are eating something that gives you an upset stomach, and I'm talking human appropriate food, I'm not talking the box stuff, then listen to your body, because it's obviously telling you you should not be eating that.
If you have a natural inclination to eat sweets and candy, that's an addiction. It doesn't mean that you have that is what your body needs.
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that one, Johann. I'm sorry. I would have let that slip by, but that's very true. And that's where you messed up biology, because now those cells that's supposed to have the transporters for in, the waste out, they either saturated or they're starving. So we constantly feel like we need to eat, but you're not starving for candy. Yeah. And especially with Valentine's coming up for those people, you're not starving candy, and keep that in mind.
Yeah. And Yvette, I also feel we're so constantly on a daily basis exposed to toxins. And we don't live in a bubble. I believe that, when your time is up, your time is up. But there are things that you can prevent to a certain matter. But I don't also think that you have to become a total fanatic and have air purifiers in every room and in your car, and where if you go outside to the grocery store, you have to have a respirator on so that you don't inhale whatever chemicals are being used. That's not living. That is just not dying.
Yes.
And I feel there's so many things in our industrialized world that we are exposed to, and that all of them cause damage to our cell membranes. Because remember, we called it a phospholipid bilayer, so it's a fatty acid. And what happens to fat if you bombard it with ozone and too much oxygen and stuff like that? It becomes rancid.
Mm-hmm.
So that phospholipid bilayer is now being oxidized. It's not functioning the way it should. And it can cause early cell death. And now that hormone cell, that cell that's supposed to produce sex hormones, thyroid hormone, whatever it's specialized to make, it's probably not going to make it as effectively as it should. And for
And you
that reason also, it needs to go through the basic functions of a cell to produce energy. It's not going to produce that energy anymore.
And you really are one of your strong loves that you fight for, because the younger generation, I know you've spoken about this before, the firemen, the people that come to the pharmacy, they have such an immense lack of testosterone. That is environmental. So you have a story with regards to that and how you've seen that in young guys.
Yes. It was just an observation of the men who get testosterone injections from our pharmacy. At least half of them, if not more, are firefighters. And it's because of low testosterone. And I want to say it's not all just low testosterone, because I just recently, a couple of weeks ago, was in a discussion with a fireman who is going to retire in a year or so. And he said he's got prostate cancer right now. And he admitted, he said, it's because I'm in the fire and in the foam and all the fire retardants all the time.
Now you touch on a very important topic there, because they are not only exposed to that through their lungs, but they're exposed to it through their skin. And this is one of my favorite topics with regards to sunblock. Why in the world would God create a sun, and we as human decides we need to lather ourselves with some other man-made chemical to block the sun? As much as what the nutrients that we need to feed ourselves orally, the sun is one of the most important things to help with the metabolism and manufacturing of certain hormones, of which vitamin D is essential. So people that lather on all these creams and oils and sunblocks and name it, and people do not realize that your skin is your biggest organ. It's being absorbed. And for years and years, they've always been known that women that are stay-at-home moms that clean the house, they are more exposed to those toxins, and they are more, as a result of that, have a higher incidence of certain cancers, because they are constantly in contact with that. And people do not realize the impact and the size of the skin and everything that you put on there. So again, those cells are starved. Those cells do not have the nutrients they need. And you might as well call us plants. If the plant needs to stand out in the sun and have a little photosynthesis, we also need that impact of the sun on our bodies so certain cells can do their specific functions. So if you do lather on that sunblock, if you think that's going to protect you, no, it's not. You are starving the cells and destroying the infrastructure so that it cannot get the waste out that's supposed to be protected.
I just had a thought.
And
I
that
I don't want to go down too many rabbit holes, but think about this. What are the two things that are so demonized in our healthcare profession? Cholesterol and the sun. What are the two things you need to make vitamin D?
cholesterol and the sun.
And vitamin D, we spoke about this. I think at some point we'll get into it a little deeper about vitamin D not being a vitamin, but actually a pro-hormone. Because without vitamin D, there's a lot of your hormones that might not work the way it's supposed to.
And it became apparent to us, especially in the time with the C time, that the big C, that people that did not have enough vitamin D, that really fought against them, and their immune system was down. And just one other thing to mention there, a precursor. You need your cholesterol and you need the lipids and sterols to be a precursor for hormones. Now, hormones are very important, because if you ever tried living without either a man or a woman that do not have hormones, it's not very pleasant. Have you tried being that person that do not have those hormones? So if this strikes a chord with you, then start thinking about feeding your cells so your hormones can be, productive. And again, we can talk about each individual one by itself, but as a whole, cholesterol and the sun and the vitamin D, how important all of that is for us.
Okay, to get back to our topic, Yvette, I've got a question.
Yes.
Let's say you pull out a brand new car. Brand new. It's never been driven before. Everything is new. Everything works like clockwork on this car. The electronics, the engine, it purrs like a kitten. It's just phenomenal. And it gets about 400 miles per tank of gas. If I come to you and say, to protect this car so that everything in it works the way it should, it keeps on purring like a kitten. And if you buy this additive to put in your car, it lasts about a month, cost you $100 a month. I just make up a price. And it will also, apart from everything keep running smoothly, it'll also give you 800 miles per tank of gas. Do you think you will invest that $100 a month to keep this brand new baby of yours running as smooth as possible?
Of course, because you said two things. First of all, energy. The energy output is more. The second thing you're telling me, I'm going to save a ton of money, because obviously if the car is performing better, if I've got so much energy coming out of it, it means I'm not going to have to go for checkups and things like that for the car because it's at ultimate performance. So two things that strike me: speed, and then obviously money.
Yes. And for me, I've had cars where I had to take it to the shop. And believe me, every day it's in the shop, I know it's costing me money, and a lot more than $100. Every time I had to, if it's not an oil change, if it's anything else, it's more than $100, I can assure you. So why don't we do that for our bodies? And if you think about it, we talked about the cell membrane. If the cell membrane looks like that cell on the left, where it's constantly being exposed to free radicals and oxidative stress and toxins and poisons in food, in our lifestyle, in what we eat, breathe, and drink, nutrients cannot come in the way it's supposed to. And it probably, very likely, can't get rid of the waste product the way it's supposed to, which means that car is not running the way it should. It's probably going to have to be in the shop more often than you like. It's going to cost you more money, and it's going to cost you more energy, because instead of the 400 miles per tank of gas, now you might get 300. Instead of driving it and everything running smoothly, it's going to be clunky. It's going to make some noises. And that noises for our human self sounds like, oh, it hurts when I get up out of bed. Oh, this hurts. Oh, why do I feel so sluggish? Why don't I have any energy? And oh, my hormones are out of whack. We spoke a lot about hormones. And if a cell that produces a hormone is happy, it gets nutrients in, it gets waste product out, it will make that hormone so much more efficient than anything else.
Well, your example that you had about the car, about the additive, if we completely put that in human perspective, I said two things: speed and money. So if myself as a person, if I have more energy every day to fulfill everything I need to do, plus when it comes to money, it means what you were saying, when you go to the shop, just change this. You go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, you go for this examination, you go for that test, you go for this surgery. So if you take all of that and put it in a human perspective, you're going to save yourself a lot of money, and you're also going to have a whole lot more energy. So where you were saying, the person gets up and everything hurts, I'm thinking of the person that cannot even get up. So think about it in that way. You're saving yourself money and you actually have energy to do the things you want to do.
Very true. And for the longest time, I did not know that we as humans can have that additive. When we have a mutual friend who told me about this additive, I immediately heard my zoology professor standing in front. If we can just have something to keep the cell membrane healthy, our cells will be so much happier, and we don't need half of the medicines that we have on the shelf. And I thought, what? You mean this actually exists? And yes, it does. Just a quick recap. The phosphobilayer. If we can have the things, the lipids and sterols, to feed the phospholipid bilayer, to make it healthy, to function the way it should, to keep its structure, to keep what it should not go into the cell out, and to allow everything in that should go into the cell to make it function the way it should, and to have that cell go through its normal processes, but creating its own energy, creating its own, getting rid of its own waste products, then the cell will be happy and it will function the way it should. So we discovered this product called TriNN from a company called Neolife that actually has exactly that. And Yvette, what does it contain?
So this, from your slide, good thing I can just tell people there. It was literally one of the world firsts for a complete phytosterol. So that means these lipid and sterols that we were talking about, it has that concentrate in this little green oil capsule. So although you see the grains up there, we are typically talking about the lipids and sterols, the oil part that was totally missing and depleted out of a lot of the food sources. So that is in a nutshell what it has. Johann, you mentioned earlier how much of the lipid and sterols in weight, and for people to visualize, how much do you have to eat to get the amount of lipid and sterols that's in one of these little.
Yes, very interesting. Per manufacturer, apparently there is 675 milligram of this lipid sterol concentrate in each capsule. So I thought, well, let's go and see how much grains should you eat to get the equivalent amount in food. Because if you listen to me and Yvette, we will always tell you, you need to get your nutrients from food. But in certain cases, and this is one of them, it really helps to have a supplement. Because to get the same amount that is in one capsule from grains, the source said you need to eat several hundreds of grams. Now, if you think 120 grams, that's about a cup.
Yep.
If you think about a cup of grains, now
That's
several hundred to me means like 3, 4, 500. And now you have to remember, because these grain oil concentrates gets manufactured from the non-carbohydrate part of that grain. And if you are going to eat several hundred grams of grains every day, you're going to become really big. You'd be an elephant before you know it.
Wouldn't get in the door.
No. And apart from being an elephant, you'd be metabolically so unhealthy, and your cells are going to hate you. Because the more carbohydrate you get in, the more stress you cause, and the more things don't work in your body the way it should. So these lipid sterols that is concentrated in this little capsule is the thing that is going to feed your cell membranes. And what we said earlier, as a happy cell membrane cause a happy cell. And you see on there, we talk about hormones. Everybody enables body to manufacture human hormones.
So again, there where we spoke about the precursors. If you have the lipids and the sterols, it'll enable the body for the hormones to form its normal function. So really helpful, especially if you are a little bit behind and you need to get ahead. I'm talking about people reaching 45, 50, getting into that time where we need to restore and replenish.
And this was actually discovered, it says here on the slide, in the 19 by some doctors who wanted to get a solution to all these customers who come complaining about chronic fatigue. And you mentioned the energy. If you're fatigued, you don't have energy. And if your cell membranes don't work, you can't produce the energy you need to live a happy and healthy life.
I remember a quote I heard about the researchers that did that, and they said the people were questioning why their get up and go had gone up and left. And a lot of these doctors were like, what is going on? Because there became a massive influx of this fatigue. Yes, we can go down the history of when it impacted and the grains and the things. That doesn't matter. We're talking about an additive that can help you get back to where you are.
And another interesting thing about this product, Yvette, there's a study that was done in 2005 called, there's a name of it. Oh, it was an article in the Human Nutrition and Metabolism, where it actually mentions, because we refine everything nowadays. If you go to get some flour or anything made with flour, all you get is the refined stuff. And the husk and the bran of these grains are thrown away. They actually give it to pigs. So the pigs are healthier than we are. So this nutrients that is in this product is virtually non-existent in our food chain today. That was what that study in 2005 discovered. So if we don't have anything to keep in our normal food to keep our cell membranes healthy, I think this is where supplementation is warranted.
Definitely is. And then I know one of the very important studies that were done on that was that Texas A&M University. That was 1987.
Yes.
And the Texas A&M University provided all the research, and again reinforced that by the ability for the body to utilize nutrients, whether it's in or out, to get rid of it, how that showed more efficient in being able to get cells to function to its full performance.
Yes, and there is a slide with the results of that study. If you see improved nutrient utilization, that is where the tank of gas, instead of lasting you only 400 miles, now it lasts you 800 miles. Optimize overall growth and development. Growth and development, I think in an adult human body, you don't think much about it, but that also has to do with your cell reproduction. Because all your body cells don't live forever, because they have to die down and they have to be replaced. And this way, they don't have to die early. And they don't have to, and when they get replaced, they actually get replaced with good cells.
So when you talk about that growth, optimal growth and development, I have seen many, and you probably have as well, years ago, people that grew up in conditions where they were very nutrient depleted and the parents were little, and then they moved to a country or changed their life and the kids were fed more nutritious food that was from the soil, and all of a sudden you have these big burly kids and everybody's wondering where it came from. We have an instance of a friend that we had where a child actually grew up on the streets and his mom hid him from Child Protection Services for years, and he lived under a bridge. And he survived mostly on food that you buy at a Circle K. And interesting enough, how this young man never grew tall. And it was all, his growth was all stunted. And I'm not saying that he would have been tall. I'm saying he would have been a whole lot taller than he was, because They realized that because of the lack of the healthy oils, the lipids and the sterols, his body wasn't able to fully develop in the formative years. So when we talk about this only as giving oil to us who are older, also think of the younger kids who need that for that optimal growth and development. And that is what's very important.
Absolutely. And especially if you think about if you have young teenage girls and boys who's just becoming that 12, 13, 14-year-old stage, and you've had them, I've had them. And let me tell you, this product is a rescue to parents. You want them to have this because when all their hormones start flaring up and things are going like normal,
Haywire.
haywire. Yes, haywire. That's a good way to put it. This really balances things out. They don't feel out of control, and you as a parent can actually handle them. So
Especially if you take this as well, because then your cells are functioning normal.
for sure, you don't want to bite off their heads every time something slips, pops.
And Johann, you and I are not people that we need to realize we're not big pill pushers. We're not big on selling and this is what you could do. You and I totally believe in the human appropriate diet. But this is something that has both changed your life, your family's life, mine, people I know, people I've impacted. And that's why we found that it was so important for us to share this. So if that question comes up in your head at this point, I answered it for you.
Yes. And we've both had different testimonies about this product from people who have used it. I remember recommending it to a single mother who was working, and she decided to take it at night, right? Because she just got her product, so she popped it, and she said, "Oh, I just need to clean my house quickly before we go to bed, because tomorrow morning is up taking the kid to school and going to work again." And she said, next time she looks at her watch and it's 2 a.m. She said she never had this much energy before. So if you start taking it, take it in the morning.
And again, we have to emphasize this is not a miracle drug like we sell in the pharmacy. This is a nutrient to help your cells function, because there's always
Yeah.
the person that'll twist things and say this. No, this is not what we're saying. We're not saying take this and you're going to be, what are those little Energizer bunnies for Duracell? No. We are
No.
saying if your cells need to perform ultimately, this will help.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a supplement. We don't make any claim towards it that it's going to give you superhuman strength or you'll never get sick again. We don't do that. That's preposterous. But it is a supplement that is a nutrient that is not in our food source anymore. And we, as pharmacists, think that you need it. I know for sure I need it. And I'm a human. So if you're a human, get it.
I think it's exceptionally important what we spoke about today. And if people can grasp the concept of that, whether it being starting supplementing with us and then walking with us through this in changing the food you eat, the stuff you buy, what you have in your house, you're going to be definitely going from medicated to motivated, because now we're putting back money in your account because you're not going to be sickly. We're going to give you energy to face every day. And I think you and I have spoken about this a lot. Sometimes we are so tired and we are so far stretched out financially that we cannot stop and think about change. Now, if you can start changing your cells at cellular level, maybe then you can give it the time of day so we can help you to change every day, becoming healthier, a better you, a better example for your family.
100%. So well put. So Yvette, that is our whole story for today.
And we thought we we're going to talk about cells for 5 minutes.
Yes. There's actually so much to say, and we did not even go down all the rabbit holes there is that's just a cell membrane. We haven't even spoken about the membrane around the nucleus inside the cell.
or the mitochondria, or for that matter, everything else that it needs to go in there.
Yeah.
So, some people might be interested, some not, but I think most people will understand how important this is.
Yes, definitely. Get that, what do you call it, that you call the cell membrane a vigilant
little gatekeeper.
little gatekeeper.
Oh, and people will ask, where do you get this? The link will be below, where we will point you in the right direction where you can get it.
Yes, link will be in the show notes. And if you like to speak to either me or Yvette, our calendar links will be there as well. So, yeah, talk to us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good time.
Take care. Views and opinions expressed on this podcast are our own and are intended for educational and informational purpose only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The information shared should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice from your personal health care provider. Always consult your physician, pharmacist, or qualified health professional before making any changes to medications, supplements, or health regimens. We are also promoters of Neolife Nutritionals, beauty, and household products, and this stems from our knowledge of their purity and the company's reputation to provide products of outstanding quality. While we may discuss our experiences in the retail pharmacy setting and share insights into functional medicine, our conversations reflect our professional perspectives and personal opinions, and not those of our employers, affiliated organizations, or licensing boards. By listening to From Pills to Purpose podcast, you acknowledge that you are responsible for your own health decisions and agree that the host and guests are not liable for any outcomes resulting from the use of the information discussed in this podcast.